Well, you guys are bringing up, right? I don't think Smashy needs any introduction, right? Hey, Dougie, if you want to just...
I'm going to introduce myself.
Okay. But for us, the Smashy, actually, I think the name comes because, he just, I think the first year, he just, the way he cracked his first year exams, right? Some ridiculously high percentage that we all struggle to even get in our school days, right? He just made, right? He just stomped all over it. And since then, there was no looking back, right? And so today it's going to be a engaging...
I haven't yet been forgiven for those missteps. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Smashy. I think we have quorum.
Okay. Thank you, Dhimant, for that kind. I know many of you, I think for those of you who I haven't interacted with, I was in the CS branch in KREC 98. And then after KREC, I did my master's and PhD in New York in RPI. That's a school in the US. And for a brief time, I worked in Bangalore in Novell Software India. And that was in 98. So if some of you were there, we might have crossed paths. After my PhD, I worked at Nortel for a little bit and then Juniper. And then I started my own company, which we're going to talk about today. Okay. Thank you so much, Guti and Dhimant, for a lot of inputs in the review session. It helped me improve the presentation a lot. Okay. We can start recording if we haven't already.
I started, Satish.
Okay, thanks, Guti. This is a picture which tells a story. It's a pretty popular picture. Have any of you been familiar with it?
Yeah, I've seen that in few LinkedIn posts, survival bias or something.
Exactly. So this is basically to caution you about how you interpret my presentation, right? So for those of you who haven't seen this picture, this is all of the spots where World War II planes got hit and returned. The US military did this analysis. And the initial insight that the US military had was that wherever there are spots, those are the places where the gunfire hit the plane. So we should reinforce those spots. And Abraham Wald was a statistician who said, no, that's actually the complete opposite of what you should be doing. You should be reinforcing all the spots where you see no gunfire. And the reason is none of those planes returned. Okay. So if the gunfire happened on any of these spots, the planes returned. And that insight came to be called as the survivorship bias. When you look at a result, a successful result or an optimistic result, you tend to attach a lot more significance to the outcome than all of the cases which had failed in the past, right? Similarly with startups, you see Elon Musk and you think you should start a car company, right? So when you look at stories about business or any outcome, when you look at success, think about those areas of the plane which are telling a story, those planes which didn't come back, right? This is called survivorship bias. And for those of you who loved operations research, Abraham Wald was the one of the original operations research scientists. He seeded that field, right? All right. So the other thing I wanted to note is that entrepreneurship is very, very varied. There's a whole ocean of entrepreneurship, and what I'm going to tell you is probably applicable to only a subset of entrepreneurial initiatives. So for example, what I did here is that, whenever you talk about entrepreneurship, you have a buyer and you have a seller. and you're either buying and selling a product or a service, right? That's right here in the middle. And depending on how you make it, whether you're making it yourself or you're reselling it, you might have different kinds of businesses, like trade-oriented businesses or manufacturing businesses. And then customers have their own reasons to buy. They might buy your product because it is cheaper, in which case it's an entrepreneurship which is focused on cutting costs or finding newer ways of making product. Or it may be better where you have some technology that makes it better than what exists, in which case it may not be cheaper, it might be more expensive, right? And the reason I have this slide here is because, what we built with Twin Prime was a business which made a product for businesses. So it was a B2B business. So it was one specific kind of entrepreneurship. And our customers bought this product because it was better technology, right? It was not cheaper, it was better. And if you have attended a few of the earlier masterclass sessions, we had quite a few flavors of these. For example, Sunil spoke about how he puts together expertise and provides that as a service to businesses, right? For example, Vijay Anand acquires art, and he's an individual, and he sells it to both individuals and businesses, right? So lots of different kinds of entrepreneurship. Again, similar to the survivorship bias, I want you to place the statements that I make in the context of what we were trying to do, right? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're first going to try and explain to you what we tried to do with Twin Prime. I have different sections, and in between we are going to break for like a few minutes for an announcement as well. So unless you have questions at this stage, I'm going to go into the next section. Any questions so far?
When you started Twin Prime, did you know that there was a product need that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, this section talks about it. Let's get into it. That's a really good question, right? So the year was 2011, and I have a chart here from Cisco. This is an old chart. We were here where it says 0.6 EB. EB is for exabytes, and exabyte is 1000 terabytes, right? In 2011, beginning of 2011, we knew that we were in the midst of a tremendous paradigm shift, an enormous swing toward mobile. We already had seen how a game changer the Apple App Store had been. It had come out in 2008. So we knew that we were in the midst of a huge shift. And being networking folks, my co-founder Karthik and I, we both did our PhD in networking together in the late 90s and in early aughts. So we were looking at the network infrastructure aspect of it and thinking, hey, if we are going to be doubling the amount of data that we send over mobile every year for many, many years to come, what do we need from an infrastructure point of view? What will break? Are we thinking through how this transition is happening from an infrastructure perspective, right? That was the context in the year 2011, right? And we had a kind of an inkling, so to speak, because we were looking at the infrastructure as part of our day jobs. We were on the other side of the table, so to speak. The mobile consumers used our products. I was in Juniper building routers and equipment for telecom networks. And Karthik was in Blue Coat, which was building proxies and web traffic processing appliances, right? And what we were seeing was that while what we called 4G LTE back then had already arrived in the US in 2010, the software was lagging. When I say software, what I mean is the stuff in your operating system. So if you use an iOS or an Android phone, whatever is inside the operating system, that's what the software I'm referring to, right? That's the software that powers your networking, the TCP IP stack, if you recall studying it in college, right? And here I have a screenshot which shows you the Linux kernel code. Unfortunately, we are still using this cubic algorithm as the default in Linux. But you see that it was committed to Linux in 2006, and it was actually outlined as an algorithm in 2004 by Injong Ri. So here we are in 2010. Operators are moving us along to a completely new generation mobile infrastructure, and infrastructure is moving into the next era, but our software is still old, at least 6 years at that time, right? So does this make sense? This the context in which we were thinking about it, the product need. I'll go in a little bit more technical detail here, and you can feel free to stop me whenever you have questions, right? So I'll spend a little bit of time on what it means when we say cellular infrastructure was improving, right? You've heard about 3G, 4G, and all these things. What is all that? What does that mean? So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I know it might get too complicated very quickly, but let's imagine there is an electromagnetic wave. You see this wave at the top left here. It has a particular frequency. Let's say it is 1 hertz, 1 cycle per second. And imagine as an engineer, if I were to consider that every time this wave returns to 0, I'm going to encode 1 bit at that 0 crossing, right? And the way I'm going to encode that is by introducing a small amplitude variation, right? Don't worry about what that means, but just assume that whenever it returns to 0, I'm able to say if it is a 1 or a 0, right? I'm encoding 1 bit per second, right? Now, you can immediately see if I have more hertz, that is more spectrum, I can transmit more bits per second, right? So that's what people refer to as bandwidth or spectrum. And that's what you hear about in the news when they say, 3G spectrum was auctioned. What does that mean? Particular ranges of electromagnetic spectrum were handed over to certain parties to use for transmission of data, right? And why is this important? If you look at the left-hand part of this slide, you see a chart here, which is quite complicated. But what I want you to look at is the line here which says Shannon capacity. Those of us who were in electrical and computer engineering might remember this. Claude Shannon was a mathematician and computer scientist in mid 20th century. And in 1948, he came up with a law which is popularly known as Shannon-Hartley law. And what that tells you is that what is the total, or rather the maximum amount of data that you could pack into a channel. So we talked about this wave going 1 cycle per second. We said we are going to encode 1 bit every cycle, right? Can I keep on increasing that? Can I encode 10 bits per cycle, 256 bits per cycle, 1000 bits per cycle. How far can I go? Is there any limit to it? Shannon said, mathematically, he proved that there is a limit to every channel's capacity. That is, every given spectrum, you can calculate how much maximum data rate you could send, right? That's pretty much what Shannon said. And in this chart, what you see is that, as you go to the right in this chart, as you see, like, -10, -5, 0, 5, 10, 15, and so on, what this chart is saying is the signal to noise ratio is increasing. What that means is that the noise is reducing for the same power, right? So if I have the same cell tower, right? And if the noise that is in the environment getting to my cell phone is reducing, then I'm going to the right in this chart. I'm going toward 40 here, right? And immediately what you see is these lines, QPSK, 16 QAM, 32 QAM, 64 QAM. See how they are rising up in the chart? That's the advancement with each cellular generation. What we are learning with each generation of cellular technology is that we are able to pack higher and higher number of bits per unit spectrum, right? I want to pause here and did that make sense? That's very complicated. So I want to make sure that we understood what each cellular generation brings you. It lets you pack more data per unit spectrum. Was that clear?
Yes, did.
Yeah. Great.
Yes,
Yeah, just a comment.
So,
This
yeah,
Shannon's algorithm is not for all ENC guys, I guess. Right? It's basically a 2-page or 3-page thesis by Shannon, which changed the industry altogether. It was only 2 or 3-page thesis supposedly. This particular algo.
Yeah, I think that's true. In fact, you can search for Shannon's paper and you'll get a small PDF file on Google. You can read it, but the impact of it is so large. Most people single-handedly credit that to the communication revolution we've had, right? It's just a piece of math, but he really set off a revolution. Right? So that's one of the key things with cellular, that we are able to pack a lot more, exponentially more data for the same electromagnetic waves, right? But the one caveat I want you to remember is that as we go toward lower and lower noise regimes, like as we go on the right to this chart, what we are also saying is that we are going closer and closer to the tower. In communication, you cannot reduce noise willy-nilly. You have to have higher power or proximity to the transmitter, right? And higher power, unfortunately, comes with its own problems of cost and radiation and all that stuff, right? It's usually proximity that cellular operators play with, right? So we're going to talk about that a little bit more on the right half of this slide, right? But not only is the number of bits that we pack into the spectrum changing, the other thing that changes with each cellular generation is how the whole infrastructure is adapting to internet itself. So if you see on the top right corner of this slide, you'll see 3G. There was a different treatment for data and voice, right? So you had these two boxes which vastly insult and simplify the complexity of the 3G network. But this is good for our discussion here. Just imagine that there's a separate voice infrastructure from data infrastructure, right? And what that immediately means is that, if your data usage increases, tough luck, you've already made your decision on how much hardware to put into the data part of the network. There's only that far you can go, right? It's not a multiplexed infrastructure, right? And even with 4G, this is like circa 2010, we had already started to shift to an all data network. So today, if you use for example, Geo's network. Geo is one of the few ground up 4G networks, 4G LTE, but 4G all the same. So with 4G, what you see is that it's data all the way. What that means is that even voice is data to the network. And it makes sense because, you know, at the end of the day, voice is just information. There's no reason why it has to be treated differently. And also, even if you did HD voice, you're not going to consume as much as data, right? With streaming video and all that. The internet over-the-top content is always going to be a lot more than what voice would consume, right? What this means is that 4G on the network infrastructure is actually very well done. It is more efficiently designed. It can scale higher and it can achieve greater data rates, right? And if you go look at 5G, you know, remember we talked about low noise regimes on the left side of the slide. You see how the data box appears closer to the tower at the bottom of this right-hand side of the slide, right? With 5G, what that means is that you can process your internet data. For example, you could do things like IoT. You might remember Guti's talk about IoT, right? And Uma had talked about IoT as well, right? So you can do things like, hey, I'm going to collect all of my sensor data and I'm going to make decisions and I'm going to change my industrial systems based on data. You can do those kind of things very, very close to the cell tower. And this is a crucial advantage because there are lots and lots of places where you can't have Wi-Fi. Cellular is the only way. And till 5G came along, you had to actually go all the way deep into the network, cross all the access network to actually process your data, right? To actually do internet-based processing, like, you know, IP-based processing. Right? With 5G now, the new regime is that you can go closer and closer to your source of your data, which means that low latency and more decentralization and many more use cases. So I'm going to pause again here and any thoughts or comments so far? Does this give you a picture of why it's a big deal as we go from 3G to 5G?
Hey, Smash, just one question. You know, in the 5G one, you said that there is data right between access networks and the cell phone pictorially. But you said a simple picture, but what is there in between physically when you say that data happens? Because there is RAN and then there is cell phone, right? So what is there in between?
Yeah, great question. So RAN is radio access network, right? So in the past, what would happen is that when you get data from the phone, it gets encapsulated in a protocol called GTP, right? And the way you can think about it is that when data leaves your phone, it and goes to the tower and leaves the tower to the access network. If you look at the bits and bytes on the wire, it's not a TCP/IP packet as it was on your phone. It is actually wrapped up in other information, and that information is called GTP. That helps the cellular network and the radio access network give it some special quality of service treatments and some special operations on how to deal with this particular data, right? Now, when it is GTP, your applications can't readily work on that data. You have to, you know, it's sort of like you have a chocolate, right? There's a wrapper around the chocolate. You can't eat it without removing the wrapper, right? So that wrapper is only removed when I have this data box, right? So in the past, you get past the RAN. The RAN is inside these access networks. After the RAN, there is another component which actually takes this wrapper off and then hands it over to the data processing entities, right? Now that bit which can do the unwrapping can now be very close to the cellular tower here, right, in 5G. And the reason is that with 5G, there is a decoupling of what we call control and user plane. Okay, control plane is how you attach to the cellular network, how you identify yourself as a subscriber, your billing and policy, all of those things. Those things can happen in the core of the network, right? But how I process your data, how I move your data along, that's the user plane. With 5G, the user plane can now be performed closer to the tower before even you cross the RAN. There is something called multi-access edge computing, MEC, wherein 5G has specified how you unwrap this data right after the cell tower and operate on it. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. From
Hey,
sure I
Satish.
can understand. Yeah. Thank you.
So that dotted data box in 5G, is that the cell provider's processing capability instead of any like a cloud provider's edge networking?
Yeah, great question. And that's an ongoing market battle right now. So you might see that Amazon is trying to get in here with their edge computing effort. Ericsson is trying this. And of course, the Verizons and AT&Ts and the Reliances of this world are also trying this. So the answer is all of the above here. Like, so long as they strike up an agreement with the operator, the edge computing may be offered by any of these vendors. Does it make sense?
It does. It does. So in terms of just to get an idea, physically, like how many kilometers are these access networks for from a user to the data part?
Yeah, that's, I tried to search for it and I couldn't find it, and possibly because there are so few MECs right now that are successfully deployed. But I did find that you could expect the latency to be of the order of 10 milliseconds for IoT purposes, right? That itself puts a physical limit on how far it can be.
Sure.
The tower itself is very close in 5G. It's like, it's smaller than a picocell. It's like, I think a few blocks away, right? Like 0.2, 0.3 miles. Whereas with 4G, the tower was miles, 0.4 miles is 500 meters, right? Right? With 4G, it's a little farther away. With 4G, this left part of it, it was like about a mile, 1 mile away. And in 3G, it's even bigger, right? So with 5G, the data box is within 10 milliseconds away. Speed of light, you could calculate what that is, right?
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, but Smashy, the compute itself could either be on the IoT side or in the access network, right? You can have, I mean, here you're showing a cell phone, but the source of data could be, it could be cameras, it could be a bunch of other things where you're doing filtering and so on before it gets into the access network, right? And then on the access side, I guess you're saying there could be something like a MEC. It could be either in the RAN or branch offices, or there could be different places where you can kind of do compute, correct?
Yeah. What people are proposing is exactly that. What they're proposing is that whatever needs heavier processing, you branch off and you go deeper into the RAN and or past the RAN to do your processing. Whatever can be done closer to the tower, you do it here. That's kind of the way it's going. I don't think these have been realized yet. I couldn't find real examples where this box, that's why I put it in a perforated box, because this is still in the future.
Just a quick follow-on question just on that. So presumably these serverless on the edge could sit in that perforated data box.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, I don't know if we can call it serverless yet, because see, the number of these boxes is going to be a lot many more than what cloud vendors have today, right? So if you think about AWS presence points, there are in the order of dozens, right? Maybe 15 to 20. However, as you go closer to the tower, this moves exponentially higher, right? For example, there is about 150,000 towers for 4G itself in the US, right? So even if you are let's say aggregating like, 100 towers, you see how the number of these installations it just explodes, right? Managing thousands of presence points is exceedingly hard. So you may not get the same kind of software infrastructure that you have in AWS or in these boxes. So it may not be the exact, like you may not be able to use AWS Lambda here, but you may get an elastic compute.
Yeah, but it's interesting, right, Smashy? I think I've seen some accounts where AWS talks about if they have about 600 edge deployments, they can cover the entire world with a certain maybe
latency
metrics and so on, right? That's what they claim.
Yeah.
They're nowhere close, but that's what they claim. But this like
They even announced a
think,
partnership with Verizon last year, which I think that we'll have more. We'll hear more this in next week. I think.
Yeah. I think it's this space is going to rapidly grow because of just the flexibility it offers to many players. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
It's Smashy. Or there's 3 use cases on 5G, right? Ultra broadband, with massive mind. Ultra low latency by getting your towers closer, and then ultra reliability by network slicing. So which of those 3 do you think, like what is the order of those 3, and how does Open RAN play into this?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? I know it's all early, but
I'm a lot more excited about network slicing than the other 2 use cases for the medium term. So the way I think about it is that, today, at my home, for example, I'm kind of a Luddite. I still have just 100 Mbps Wi-Fi broadband connection, right? With 100 Mbps, all 3 of us, like my daughter, my wife, and I, we all stream video all the time, right? So, and I'm streaming 4K as well. So I'm not yet convinced that we yet have a killer app which needs the gigabit per second per device bandwidth that 5G is offering. But I do believe that it will set off the next set of killer apps which are not at all bandwidth constrained. I think that's a good thing. But then if I think about network slicing, right, I think there's huge potential in many different ways. One is security, right? Today, with 5G, I think, I was talking to Pattu recently, this is one area where we are seeing that, the VPN is getting closer and closer to the end users, right? With 5G, what you can do is each enterprise can have its own network all the way to the device, right? There is nobody in between listening to you, right? So I feel network slicing has a lot of potential in terms of virtualizing the network, be it from a security perspective or reselling it to specific applications and kind of creating like many networks out of a network. How do you think?
I think I agree.
Yeah.
I think I agree. And then what I'm wondering is this Cloud RAN or the Open RAN play? How does it play into it? Like, is it a precursor to getting there, or?
I don't think so, because see, the thing with a lot of these consortiums which provide Open RAN, I'll speak about it in a few slides down. We were engaged with Verizon and people like that, and back in 2010, they were moving to off-the-shelf packet gateways and serving gateways, and even then. They relied heavily on proprietary RAN technology. And the reason is that there is a productization hurdle. There is one thing with having software, and then there is another thing of configuring and running it, right? And that's where the Ericssons and these Huawei's of this world shine. The last bit is very hard. So I think while these consortiums are important from a political alignment and strategizing standpoint, I don't think beyond that it will break the hold of some of these proprietary vendors.
Yeah, thanks, Smashy. I think I agree.
Yeah,
it's very different to deploy it, and The vendors have too much power right now.
Yeah.
In terms of the numbers, Satish.
Yeah.
So you said 150,000 towers for 4G. How many will there be for 5G, just in terms of scale or comparison?
Right. So that's a little bit hard to project, because what 5G will do is that in urban areas, you will see a proliferation of 5G cells. However, in less denser rural areas, there may not be much coverage at all, actually, because it's just too expensive. So even if you were to do like an average math of, let's say, 4x is the theoretical reduction in cell size, let's say, right? I would say it might come somewhere in between, like, it may not be like 600,000, but rather like 300,000 cells or something like that.
Hey, guys, let's Smashy move on as well, guys.
Yeah. One quick request. I think there's a lot of exciting content just on his journey through Twin Prime. So if there are technical questions, maybe we just put it on chat and we'll take it up towards the end of the talk. That's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. That's good. So I feel like at least some of us now understand what all the hoopla is about 3G and 4G. So if you see, how good the cellular infrastructure had become, and the software was kind of lagging behind. And I have an analogy here. I'm saying MS-DOS on Core i7. Core i7 is like Intel's latest generation desktop chip, for example. It really zooms, and it's like running MS-DOS, like that old single-threaded operating system on it, right? And that can't be good. You get suboptimal user experience and a lot of times slow user experience. The cellular infrastructure was built for much greater things, and now you have bad software which is not able to keep up with it. And for businesses, that means they can't deploy their killer apps, or even if they did, the poor experience can drive away a lot of people, right? So this is where we were in 2011. This slide is pretty much what our thinking was, me and Karthik, that hey, this can't be good, right? So the question we asked to ourselves was, wait a minute, what if we rethink internet transport, right? So we've been used to a certain way of doing internet, right? Why should that be so? I mean, why can't we just rethink the internet? If we designed the software for transporting data in 2011, what would we do? And we had a vision which I encapsulate in 3 bullets here. One, like I showed you in that screenshot, the Linux kernel has the TCP stack today, right? And when it is part of the kernel, it does not evolve quickly. It's hard to make changes to the operating system. Imagine upgrading your iOS or your desktop Windows operating system version. It's a lot of effort, right? It's not easy to evolve. So one thing we wanted to do was decouple the transport stack from the kernel so we can enable faster evolution, right? The second is, we have all these fantastic capabilities in the new infrastructure. Why don't we adapt the transport stack to be aware of it and exploit it better? That's the second one. And the third one is, now that the App Store is here, the Play Store is here, we know that on mobile, the app workloads are going to just explode. The kind of applications and the nature of their data signatures is going to explode. Nothing like what we had pre-mobile, where you had a lot of consolidation in Windows-based desktop browser applications, right? And immediately after 2008, you see this, it's sort of like the Cambrian explosion in applications, right? So why not tailor the experience to the application's needs using machine learning? We already have machine learning. Machine learning is democratized. People like AWS have offered toolkits that we can use. Why not tailor the network using machine learning? So these were the 3 things that we thought we could do to change internet, right? So when I say we here, I mean, me, my co-founder, and our families, right? Until 2013, you can assume it's just the two of us, right? So wait a minute, can we just change the internet? I thought the internet is this thing that just runs. How can we change it? Well, yes, you can change the internet. Internet is primarily built on open source technologies. For example, I have this logo here on the left, which is the open source initiative. This penguin, the familiar logo of Linux. NetFilter is a commonly used technology to do networking processing in Linux. FreeBSD is one of the most popular sources of open free software. So you can change stuff, and you can put internet, you can introduce new protocols, you can introduce new ways of doing things, but there's a catch. You do have to convince a lot of people to adopt it for the internet itself to change, right? It's sort of like an emergent entity, right? So this is where we were in 2011, where we realized that, okay, we know that there's a big pain point. The cellular infrastructure has really moved ahead. The software has not caught up. And the addressable market is very large. It is practically every business that is going to be affected by mobile, which is practically every business. And we think we have a disruptive technology, which I encapsulated in those three bullets in the past slide. Put it all together, we saw an opportunity, right? So at this point, we were convinced that we can help improve mobile experience. And it's important to state that, look, we were not in a vacuum, right? My wife is with Google. She joined Google in 2010. She's part of the search infrastructure. So it's kind of the core part of Google. And Karthik's wife was in Walmart. She's an exec in Walmart. So financially, we were secure. So I do want to put that out there because, we were privileged in that sense that, we could make these kinds of decisions. The other thing that I want to tell you is a key consideration for us was that our employers, my employer was Juniper at that time, and Karthik's employer was Blue Coat, which became Citrix later on via acquisition. They were also in the networking space, so doing this part-time was just simply out of the question. There would be intellectual property issues which would not be worth it, right? So we quit our day jobs, right? So I saw, some of the questions in the survey, like, what is the right time? How do you know when to take the plunge? And, the answer is unsatisfying. Unfortunately, it depends a lot on your personal circumstances, your gut check. And one thing I have to say here is that before this particular decision to work on this idea, Karthik and I had come close to taking the plunge a couple of different times in the past before this, right? And we had known each other since 1999, for more than 10 years. And so this is kind of a process. It doesn't happen overnight, one day that, oh yeah, let's go quit our jobs, because it's a huge decision. It's a scary decision. And especially being in a country where we were relatively new, it's even more underwhelming. Right? So I want to pause here, and I think there were a lot of questions around this particular topic that, how do you take the entrepreneurial plunge? Any thoughts or questions here?
Hey, Smashy, what about the same question rephrased? When did you go from the V to the larger V? What part of the product made you convinced you can go to the larger V? And what part of the product made you convinced you need to go to the V and quit day jobs?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. In next section, we're going to talk more about that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so the vision. What I want to point out here is that vision was very generic. It was very broad. We were very ambitious because we literally wanted to change the entire internet. Right, that was the vision. And as you'll see in the next section, the way the vision takes shape is actually different from the vision itself. It's kind of a subset of the vision, right? So I want to pause here and Guti, do we want to do the announcement right now so that we have the most
Yeah, I was just trying to ping Arun. Thanks, Smashy. Wanted to check whether he wanted to plug his pitch right now. Arun, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, guys. So let me first see myself. Yeah. So first of all, Arun Narayan here. For those of you that haven't seen me for a while, quite a few things have changed. A lot of us have matured, and it's nothing more is amazing for me for the last few months than having been in contact with all of you and seeing what each of you has been up to and what you've been doing. And I must say that amongst all the networks that I have, this one in particular is very special. And it's very special because I was actually talking to Guti about it yesterday. And the diversity of the careers that we've chosen to pursue, or the subjects or the areas that we are in, and how we are able to connect with each other is incredible. And I think it's something that is definitely worth preserving. And I say this when my other alma mater is, I think some of you might know, is very well known to have a very strong network in the US as well, right? It's the University of Michigan. And they, even what I see in this batch is a microcosm which probably is not as, is smaller in size, but very, very strong. So the thought was, how do we actually make it better and bigger? I think Anand and the entire Masterclass crew has done an amazing job in terms of sharing, providing us with a platform where we can share and learn from each other. So that is one aspect, right? And the other is, I think, our own experiences, if we had known what we know today, when we were probably in KREC, I think the journey for us would have been very different, and at least somewhat less uncertain. So definitely there's an opportunity to actually see how we can, not only whatever learnings we are sharing, is it possible for us to even take it back to the institute and students there, and in the process also meaningfully engage with us, right? So that was the thought with which we actually, as most of you know, we sent out a survey. And after that, we've had a few series of meetings amongst ourselves. We've also spoken to the Alumni Association, or at least the secretary in the Alumni Association, to see what are the activities and how they are engaging. We've spoken to the dean, and then a couple of times now. Last time, in fact, the senior most person of the institute was also on the call, just to observe. And we think that there is a lot of, this institute is also hungry for more engagement from the alumni as well. So tomorrow we have a meeting where I've already put the link on the main group. And there are a series of documents that we can also share before that. And I think the initiatives can be basically grouped into two major buckets. The one is students and how you impact them, and the institute and how we can impact them. So it's your chance to participate tomorrow. Come and make sure that you are able to contribute to the vision and the mission and even how you go about it. And I've had a conversation with a few of you. Any folks on the call, if you have any questions, please ping me. I think this is the long weekend, and I've had a lot of personal time as well as time to interact with folks here. So it's a great great time to actually reignite, and thanks to MasterKlass for providing us with that platform. And it's an inspiration for us to truly make it strengthen the relationship and also probably take it to the next level. So look forward to have all of you and more on the call tomorrow. Guti, that's all. Thanks. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Arun.
Okay, great. I think
Over to you.
There was a link for that tomorrow's meeting, right? It's on the KREC 98 chat.
Yes, yes. I'll re-forward it, and it'll be there in the subject or the header as well. So I'll put that out.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Smash, just one question on that. You said in July 2011, when you quit your day jobs, and you said you had you understood the problem, the opportunity that you identified. Was there anything more that you had concretely worked on, or you had the confidence that this, you can solve it?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good question, and I think this is a trait with a lot of founders I've met, that we think too highly of our ideas. So to be very honest, we didn't really do much research on whether it is feasible. And as if you see this picture, this is referring to Rambo, Rambo 1 actually, but the first blood was our own blood. So we realized that we had not done enough background work. I'm going to talk about the mistakes now. Right. Okay. So I'll take a little bit of a detour here about raising money, because there were a lot of questions on this survey about raising money. So the first question is really, should we raise money? And I thought it will help a lot of people to know how we thought about whether we needed to raise money or not. And the way we thought about it was from a perspective of the milestones that we had in front of us. So the way we defined our first milestone is that we estimate that, hey, we'd need about 6 to 8 engineers. And in the Silicon Valley, this math is very, very common. You take about $200,000 a year per engineer as the loaded cost, including healthcare and taxes and everything. It will cost you that much. And you need at least like a year and a half to do anything reasonable in the infrastructure space. It could be shorter in other entrepreneurial ideas, right? And at the end of that milestone, we would have a product. That's about it. Nothing much else. No revenue, no adoption, nothing, right? Very limited marketing and sales spend was included in that math. And based on that math, if you look at it, it's like 1.8 million for payroll plus, let's say, 200K for other SG&A kind of stuff. And we said, hey, we need about $2 million, right? So the advantage with this kind of thinking is that it helps you decide whether you can do something without money, and whether whatever you do without external investment, is it a milestone that you aspire to achieve? For example, let's say in the case of your business, you could not only get to a V1 product, maybe you can even get to revenue, right? Then your answer should be that, hey, this is a big milestone, I might raise more. Or the other possibility might be that your first milestone may only cost, let's say, $100,000, and you could maybe put it together by asking friends and family, in which case you don't need to go raise with institutional lenders. So thinking in terms of milestones, I definitely like it. There are lots of different ways of going about answering this question. Did this framework resonate with anybody? Any thoughts on this question?
Smashy, is that, I mean, there's should we raise money and then there's can we raise money based on what we have, right?
Yeah. I'm going to tackle can we raise money in a little bit in a couple of slides.
Smashy, Psycho here. So how many Excel sheets you changed before raising your first funding?
Yeah, so we didn't have Excel sheets before we raised money. So we raised on a PowerPoint. But I'll tell you a little bit more about this particular iteration. We failed to raise money in this particular iteration. But when we did raise, we didn't have an Excel sheet. And I assume when you say Excel sheet, you mean like a financial model, right? So the financial model we had was so hand wavy. When I say hand wavy, it's it is so full of assumptions that if you did something like a sensitivity analysis on it, it would be either zero or out of the park. So there was no point to that financial modeling that we did because it was full of numbers we pulled out of thin air. Right? The model that we did was not worth anything, and we realized that only after speaking with investors. Right? Did that make sense? For us, we didn't do a financial model.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And Satish, you didn't hire any salespeople, or was this after the V1 launch? When did you hire sales?
Oh, no. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that. It was before launch. We did hire salespeople. I'll tell you about that.
Nobody cares about sales. And he joined Salesforce.com. That's an irony there.
He realized his mistakes.
Yeah, I realized that. Now I care for salespeople.
Smashy, so just another question. So did you have the product in any form or shape before you decided to raise money? Was there any coding done?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually built a prototype in 2011. It was working for the, I'll tell you what use case we tackled, but we did have a product prototype, but it didn't matter to the fundraising conversation. As we realized later on, we didn't know that it wouldn't matter. But that's, that depends on the investing fraternity you're part of. There are investors who care about product prototypes. The Valley in the US, Silicon Valley in the US, is somewhat dismissive of value of the product prototypes.
Why would you say that? Why are they dismissive? Any idea? Any reason?
The Valley is more focused on execution. Okay, there is not as much importance to the idea. There's not as much importance to the product itself. There is a certain base quality of the product that is assumed that, you vet that when you have a gating factor on who you're going to fund. So you don't even talk to somebody if you think that they couldn't build a good product. Okay, that's the mindset in the Valley. It's like there's a base gating factor where, okay, do these people have the capability to build the product they're claiming to build? If they are, then, me as an investor, I anyway can't tell if the product is any good. The customer is the one who is going to decide it. Why would I even bother, right? Why would I even bother vetting that product, right? The only things with reference to the technology that investors end up vetting is any provisional patents that you had, if that's worth anything. That's the only thing that they vet in terms of like a competitive mode.
Interesting. Thanks.
Okay. So here, one thing to think about is, Nagesh brought up, can we raise money? And the other aspect of should we raise money is knowing the implications of raising money, right? When you raise money, a few major things happen. One is you give up ownership equity. And this is a huge, huge thing. Never underestimate the importance of this cost. you are building a company with your blood, sweat, and tears, literally. And giving up any sort of equity, you should think deep and hard about it. It's a huge ask. And the second big annoying thing for a lot of us who are entrepreneurial is the fact that you now have a boss. I mean, a lot of us do get into these things because we're sick and tired of having bosses and want to be our own boss. And the moment you raise money, you now have a boss. Whether you call them the boss or not, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your investors, right? The third thing, which is very subtle, is that your freedom is limited in very, very intangible ways in terms of the outcomes that are acceptable to your investors. I'm going to talk about how it affected our company as well a little bit later. But you can't ignore the fact that when you make a decision, you're now going to impact the investor's outcome as well. You are going to consider that in every decision you make, okay? And that is very constraining. So you need to know that these are the costs of raising money. And if you're thinking, wow, that doesn't sound good, there are good reasons to raise money, right? And I list a few of them here. One is, of course, when you have capital as the sole hindrance to certain goals that you may achieve. Think about companies such as Uber or Flipkart or Swiggy or things like that, where there's a long road to profitability and you need that capital to fuel your growth and expansion. It's great. Those business models would not even have been feasible without external capital, right? The other thing that, it can happen sometimes is when you really get a good investor who has operational experience in your domain. But this is, I underline can, because this is very, very rare. More often than not, you should look at money as just that. It's just money. That's it. It's rarely expertise. And the investor brand, when you bring on strong investors, let's say you raise money from an investor who has a credibility, it definitely helps with hiring. It helps with acquiring talent. And that's a very big challenge for startups. If you start your own company, having somebody commit their career to your company, it's a very big ask. It's a very big deal, right? And anything that helps you in hiring, that's great, right? Those are some of the reasons why you might raise money. And some businesses you can't even start without capital, right? For example, Twin Prime was enterprise focused, sales cycles. Anant probably has the worst end of the sales cycle, but even our sales cycles were like 6 to 8 months long. And if it takes you that long to convert a customer to a deal, you do need cash runway to not die. That's pretty much what it is, right? So what I want to get to with these two slides is that you need to understand if you really need money. Okay, there are costs to raising money. If you need it, definitely go for it, right? So now coming back to, can we raise money, right? The question that Nagesh asked. And I take this slide to kind of answer that in the context of venture capital money, because that's the one that I'm more familiar with. And here in this slide, I'm trying to put you in the mind of a venture capitalist, okay? So for those who don't know what venture capital is, venture capital investors, they take higher risk than normal. And in return, they return higher rewards to their investors, okay? And typically you might have heard some of these names. For example, Sequoia is a venture capital firm. Andreessen Horowitz is a venture capital firm. And, and venture capital money has of late been very, very successful in funding some of the really successful startups of late. Like, all of the large unicorn names that you think about in recent past are usually venture capital funded, right? So can we raise venture money as a startup? Let's say I have a business. Should I raise venture money? Can I raise venture money? That's what I'm trying to answer here. Now, there's a lot of jargon here, but this first line here, it really describes the thinking of many venture capital investors. A VC investor picks an investment if it can return their whole fund. I'll tell you what that means. This is a paraphrasing of what Peter Thiel says to anybody who talks to him. And what that means is that, let's say I'm a venture capital investor. I have a $100 million fund. And I have promised my investors, let's say pension funds or universities or whoever has put in money in my fund, I have promised them a 3x return after 10 years. Okay. So I have told them that, hey, if you give me $100 million, I'm a VC, I'm going to give you back 300 million after 10 years. Okay. That's what he's promised them or she has promised them, right? So that's the fund. The fund is the 100 million and the outcome that they need is 300 million. Right? No matter how many companies they invest in, what kind of companies they invest in. Now, when the venture investor is speaking to you, the entrepreneur, they're asking themselves, hey, will this company alone help me return my fund? Okay, it's a very different way of thinking because, you know, in investment, for example, if you're investing in mutual funds or you're investing in savings accounts and things like that, you're thinking of it as like a diversified portfolio and, you know, in sum, you want to make a particular return, right? Venture investing doesn't work like that. It works on what is known as power law returns. Power law means that a very small number of events have an outsized impact, right? That's what power law means in statistics, right? So if a venture fund has, let's say 20 companies that they invest each $5 million in, you can expect like 2 of them will succeed to any reasonable degree and the rest 18 just fail, right? They either fail to return the money or they return just the principal, right? So if you do the math, it turns out that for a fund of this size, which is a smaller fund, and the return of this side, 3x is a low return in the VC industry. Your startup would have to be sold for something like $750 million to make sense for the VC to put $5 million. Okay. So if you're going to go to this VC and ask for 5 million, the VC is thinking, is this startup going to at least sell for $750 million, right? So for you as an entrepreneur, you should be thinking, okay, what is my addressable market? Is it going to get close to, let's say, $1 billion or 750 million or whatever is depending on the size of the fund? If it's not going to be in that neighborhood, it doesn't mean that your business is bad or it's not worth doing that. You may still build a really good business which does $10 million a year and, you know, you'll be a king. But it only means that you should not be going to raise venture capital money. So that's the can part of it. You cannot raise venture capital money with that kind of a business. Does this make sense? This is a little bit complicated, but bottom line is there is a concept called venture scale. Unless you think your business can be venture scale, you shouldn't go down the venture route.
Absolutely made sense, Smashy, to my original question.
Smashy, I think the math made it complicated, but the first slide was absolutely perfect. You know, a lot of people in India, especially India, is a very, very premature venture capital, private equity, angel investment market. This slide, a lot of people just don't get the fact that you now have a boss, or that selling 20% of your company is meaningfully adverse in many, many, many circumstances. And why I say that is because, you know, when I started my own business in 2010 and I ran it for 5 years, there were one of my juniors used to be at Sequoia India, and he called me in. And there were 2 times when, you know, venture capitalists of different kinds kind of interviewed us or called us in, and we were tempted to go out and raise money. We never raised money for 5 years. And both the times, this was the only point. When we stepped out of the room, I said, if this is the kind of guy that I need to report into, I was better off in my job reporting into Rashesh Shah. You know, although he was like the second senior most guy in Sequoia, India, you know, it was just a very, very, and he may be a great guy, you know, but we didn't get along. And I was like, I'm not reporting into this guy for sure. I'd rather go back to my job. So I think this slide is the really great slide among all these three, because when you get into numbers and people say, oh, everybody believes that they must be building $1 billion company. You know, I would assume that if someone's left, everybody here is done reasonably well in their careers, and when they go out to build their own stuff, I'm assuming that they would think that they do very well. But I think this slide of, you know, why most people are doing their own stuff is simply because they don't want to report into whoever they were reporting into. And getting a boss and having to be answerable is not why you quit your job. And you need to be very, very, very clear about that. And a lot of angel investors and all are genuinely very mediocre. So, you know, answering to them is just no joy at all. So this is a great, great slide. And I wish more investors and more entrepreneurs in India just internalize this slide. It would make India a far better place as a market. You know?
Yeah. And, you know, it's not India specific either. This is something that, you know, I didn't know about this either, right? When we raised venture, we thought of the very event of raising venture itself as a success marker, right? That's the mindset we had, and I made that mistake.
Correct.
So it's a very common mistake that entrepreneurs make, be it India or US. And I feel India and US, at least from a startup perspective, they're very, very similar. The mindset is similar. The culture is very similar. So you're right on there. Yeah.
Smash, in the Silicon Valley, do you know of any companies that are B2B or B2C but didn't have to raise money?
Yeah, there is a ton of such companies. So, you know, in fact, right now there is
so many,
the most popular, Calendly. Have you heard of Calendly? That lets
the Nigerian guy. Yeah.
Zoho.
Yeah.
Zoho is a big one.
Zoho is India-based. I think Bangalore-based. I think there are lots of Chennai. Okay, yeah. There are lots of such companies which have succeeded without venture and in B2B.
And especially in B2B.
Yeah.
Especially
and
you have teams that go in with huge networks. You know, they've spent their entire life there and they're just literally stepping out. And three of them are saying, we'll build this. So especially in B2B, there's tons of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So B2B probably works. B2C unlikely, right? B2B with maybe family.
B2C happens only when there is that virality, right? You know, you don't have a manufactured virality. Like if you're not Quibi, I don't know how many of you have heard of Quibi. It's like this.
An app. You need an app.
So if you did, so to build an app today, the bar has really, really become very, very affordable, which is very, very nice. It's a great time to build your own app business. But the flip side is that with B2C, to build an audience, it does take a lot of capital. Unless you get, you know, for some reason it becomes viral and it all comes crashing in, you know, inbound attention. But those are very, very rare. Yeah.
Guys, we all need to move on, please.
Yes, thank you. So, you know, this math, as Ken said, it's a little complicated, and I also have an asterisk here because this math is actually not correct. It's even worse. But what I want you to remember is that venture is not necessarily the only way you can get your business off the ground. There's a whole slew of options. Do not discount the value of debt based off of revenue as a collateral, right? That's a great way to grow your business. If you have line of sight to revenue, I would rather use accounts receivable as like a collateral and, you know, get money that way. So let's say you are asking for money, no matter who you're asking from. It could be angel, it could be banks, it could be family, it could be friends. What would an investor look for? And this is not just for investors, but it'll also help you decide whether you are ready for money, right? And I've used 3 terms here which are very popular in the Valley, at least: team risk, market risk, and execution risk. And they're kind of obvious what they are. Market risk is saying, is there a market for this product? And one of the things that is counterintuitive is that having competitors is actually a great thing. If you don't have competition, most savvy investors consider that that's a proxy for not having a need. And the reason is that, there is really no new idea out there. This practical, I mean, at this point, ecosystems like, let's say Bangalore or Gurgaon or Silicon Valley, they move so fast that it's very unlikely that you're the only person with a given idea in a market, right? And if there aren't any competitors, the wisdom of the crowd's way of thinking about it is that maybe nobody needs this, right? So market risk is basically saying, is there a market? Is it obvious as an investor or as a reasonably informed person? Is it obvious for me that there's a big market for this? Right? Team risk is, do you have the right background? Either in the founding team or in one hop away, that if you are able to say, look, I have spoken to this person, he's going to come on board the moment I raise money. That's also okay. But you need to have a team with the required expertise, right? And then execution risk. How hard is it to reach your customer? So there is a term called go-to-market, which is common in B2B world, which means how you're going to reach your customer, how are they going to know about you, and how you're going to make the sale, right? So when you have an idea, and there was a question on the survey which said, how do I know I'm ready to raise money? I would try and put myself in this framework and ask, okay, what does my team risk look like? What does my market risk look like? And what does my execution risk look like? If they are high, in my own opinion, it's going to be higher in the investor's mind, because the investor is going to be even more conservative than me, right? Does this make sense? Any thoughts on this slide?
Hey, Satish, great talk. So since your journey, have you yourself invested in any companies?
No, I've come close to it, but I haven't yet, because I'm still confused about which way I should go. So the thing is, the way I look at investing is not like a passive investor. If I invest in a startup, I want to be involved in the company. And,
You'll be the boss.
I won't be the boss, because, I've had a boss and I don't like that. But the thing is that if you are not able to add value beyond the money, I don't, I'd rather just go for a passive investment vehicle. So for that reason, and as well as the investment scene is changing rapidly now, you have investment mutual fund for startups, you can think of it as. There are a lot of people coming up with those kind of products. So I'm still on the fence. I've not yet invested.
So you don't like any of the Smashies out there, right? That's the bottom line.
No, I do have a lot of people I like, but it's also the other way around. To be fair, that
no, okay,
they would rather take money from a Sequoia first than me. So
thank you.
Okay. So where should I look for investors? This networking question came, not in the computer networking sense. A lot of people asked, how do I find these investors? And there's, not a satisfying answer here. But for a lot of early stage companies, accelerators can help. For example, things like Y Combinator. I know Y Combinator is in India as well now. And I think there are a lot of other accelerators which are in each market, Europe, London, and India. I haven't named all of them here. The good thing with that is you'll be in a cohort where you'll see other founders, you'll build a network of your own, but it is expensive. Accelerators take quite a big chunk for a small amount of money, right? And then a few other ideas like, pitch competitions are good places to meet investors. AngelList is a good resource. However, it's very US focused, I think. And then of course, debt, but you need to be a little later stage. If you have something to collateralize with a bank, that's not a bad idea at all. For a limited equity, you can get a line of credit. And then, if you're also in revenue and you're at a later stage looking to scale, corp dev is also not a bad way to go. It will help you scale. Corp dev means that, let's say you're building some cell phone manufacturing or something like that. Let's say, just take an example, right? And you think you could benefit greatly from Samsung's reach worldwide, right? So you go to Samsung and say, hey, look, I have this neat startup and revenue stream. I'll give you X% of the revenue. You invest in me, and we can grow together, right? And you get the sales channel and footprint that Samsung has. So that's the kind of strategic investment you can also explore if you're later stage. Okay. Of course, no matter which stage you are in, reach out to other people who have already founded companies. Ask them for intros, look up their LinkedIns and say, hey, I see this person in your network. Can you introduce me? And usually intros are very cheap because they usually don't result in much. So it shouldn't be hard to get intros, right? So don't hesitate to reach out to other folks, like, people who have in masterclass, you've seen so many presentations now from other founders. So reach out to us, right? So coming back to our story, right? What did we try to raise money for? We said, okay, we had that vision that, hey, we're going to change the internet. We're going to deliver everybody the new experience. And we thought, hey, we know the network infrastructure market. Let's realize this vision using the telecom operator network. So we said, we'll introduce these innovative algorithms in the telecom operator network, and we'll optimize the mobile experience. So that's the logo that you see there. We're going to insert ourselves in between the tower and the business. Okay? And thinking back, we had a high everything risk. What I mean is that we were first-time founders. The incentive for telecom operators to invest in such a disruptive solution was not clear. The market risk was high. The business model was fraught. It's very, very hard to sell to telecom operators. Execution risk was high. And yet, as I said, we didn't know all these things when we started out. We were trying to raise VC money. But why did we do that? Well, we were too full of ourselves. We thought we were geniuses, right? And what happened? Well, nobody was willing to fund us, right? We had some good customer interest. Telstra is an Australian cellular infrastructure operator. Verizon is an American company. Deutsche Telekom, T-Mobile is a European company with a big US presence. Customers were interested, but investors told us uniformly that no way, we are not touching you with a 10-foot pole. This is, I don't know how many of you watch Seinfeld, where you have the scene where George is breaking up and he says, it's not you, it's me. It's kind of applies to us in a weird way that, it says it was not the investors that were wrong here. So that was the end of the first iteration that we tried. It obviously resulted in failure, right? And this was winter of 2012, and it was a particularly hard time. And this kind of emotional up and down was routine in the startup. And this is something that you should know if you are planning to get into an entrepreneurial life, that it is brutal on your emotional health. It's not easy, right? And if I think back, the ups are are really exhilarating, and I'm going to talk about some of those. The successes are really truly satisfying, and the downs are exponentially worse. It's like getting socked in the stomach every so many weeks or months, right? So this is something constant throughout the startup journey, no matter whether you're doing well or you're not doing well. Right? The downs never go away, right? So just something to think about, that if you are a person who you think is who values emotional stability, you should think a little bit deeper about how you fortify yourself. Right? Any thoughts so far?
No, Smashy, keep going, please.
Yeah. So now here we were, end of 2012, we had failed at what we thought was a fantastic idea. And in retrospect, if we had done even like the basic market research of talking to some of these investors and operators, we would have known. But we learned the hard way. What did we do? Well, we were still obsessed with mobile. We thought, look, there is no way this is not a problem right now. This is a phenomenal opportunity. And this is kind of the zone that you get into when you're convinced about an idea, that you can't give up, physically can't give up, right? At the cost of your own well-being. That's the nature of these kind of things. We randomly built an iOS app. Back then, building apps was all the rage, and we said, yeah, why not? We'll also build an app. So Karthik and I, we built an iOS app which could do Facebook photo search. It was like a rich media app. And what we realized was that the experience was really bad. Even in Silicon Valley with 4G LTE, we had like a bunch of phones with which we were trying this stuff. And even with the network we had, the experience was really bad. And we again found ourselves asking, hey, wait a minute. This is kind of confirming what we already thought was the case. How about if we thought about the mobile apps instead of the telecom operators, right? So that was the pivot. We said, okay, we know what to do, but why bother with telecom operators? They're very hard to convince right now and very hard to raise money for. How about if we have our own cloud in the AWS, right? And then we had a software component inside the mobile app. If you notice, it's still the similar vision that we want to improve mobile experience in the network, but a different positioning, right? And what happened? Well, we got money, right? What we did was when we started thinking around this direction in early 2013, we leveraged our network. Karthik is from Roorkee, and my Juniper connections, and back then InMobi happened to be a Roorkee founded company. It still is, of course, then, not back then. And we got some of these large customers really interested immediately. I mean, when we talked to them about the mobile problem, they said, hey, yeah, we are losing revenue in ads because they just don't deliver. We want a way to deliver rich ads. It's really hard to deliver rich ads in many cellular markets. How about if we bundle your SDK into our ad SDK? And similarly, other apps were also immediately interested. And so in mid-2013, the investors that we had talked to for the earlier idea, they reached out to us again saying, hey, your name is popping up in a few other conversations. What are you guys up to? And the reason this happens is that, when you are in a space which is kind of exploding, mobile was exploding at that point, investors are seeing a lot of these ideas come by their desk pretty much. So we got approached again by some of the investors, and we thought, hey, wait a minute, somebody is approaching us. We better line up some options. And we also went out and reached out to some of the investors that we liked. And in mid-2013, we ended up raising a seed money. And we got a really good team funding us, fortunately. And Anand and Venki, these are both IIT President's Gold medalists and PhDs in data and when I say data here, they're in the database world and queuing systems. So they were technologists who had built companies. Jungly is what is Amazon's marketplace today. They had sold Jungly to Amazon. They worked with Bezos early on when Amazon was growing. And then Rajiv was in Broadcom and KVM, and now he's the CEO of Innovium. So we raised a seed round with a really good set of people. Om was the founder of GigaOM, which used to be a tech blog, which was very popular. And he was a founder himself. So a bunch of founders doing the seed round for us. That worked out very well. And a year later, we also raised our Series A. Right? So if you think about what changed, it's the same vision. However, what changed was that the market and the execution risk receded just by our repositioning it in a different manner. Like, we were now selling to enterprises, which was a much better known and more loved business model among the investors. And then the market risk receded because the mobile app market was just exploding with viral apps every now and then that were coming to the
fore. Banker, Smashy?
What was that, Ken?
Did you use a banker or did you do the raise yourself?
We had a lawyer, not a banker. So what we did early on was we hired a law firm named Auric, which again came through other founders. Founders told us that, hey, these guys are good at parsing term sheets and driving good deals for founders. So we went with them. And we struck a deal with the lawyers. Even before the seed round, we had them on. What we did was we told the lawyers that, hey, we'll raise money. When we raise money, we'll give you money. And the way the lawyers work in the Valley is that if the lawyers themselves are convinced about the idea, they'll agree to these kinds of deals. Right?
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's the reason I bring back those risks again is that, you see how once the risks changed, we could raise money, right? So this is the mandatory TechCrunch post about our launch, but this is actually 2014 and not 2013, 2015 rather. What happened after we raised money, right? I think.
Smashy,
yeah,
quick thing. So since you made the pivot, right? I mean, how did your competitive landscape change? As in, because like you were saying, I mean, there were other people as well. But since you made this pivot to mobile app, were there others who were already there? I mean,
fantastic question. Yeah, that goes back to the market risk, right? So when we were in the previous iteration, our competitors were people like Byte Mobile, Skyfire, and a few other Context Logic and a few other companies who were themselves startups, but kind of established startups who were catering to the telecom market, and they were all doing poorly. Okay, they had been around for a few years doing video transcoding and compression and things like that, and they were not doing well. Okay, that was the previous iteration before the pivot. After the pivot, we were being compared to SDK companies like ad SDK, like Mopubs or InMobis or Segment, and these SDKs which provide some functionality for mobile apps, and all these guys were doing great, right? So in the investor's mind, you see how the contrast suddenly changes, right? You just put yourself in a segment which is just doing really, really well, right? So the competitive landscape changed completely.
Okay, thank you.
So, somebody, I think Monty asked, when did you hire sales and what happened after raising money, right? So till we raised money, we were just the two of us, we never planned to bootstrap, but we ended up bootstrapping for 2 years. So 2013, we hired a team. That meant we hired product, we hired sales, we hired marketing, we hired engineers. At the time of launch, we were at around 12 or 13 people, about 8 or so engineers, and the rest was all the other functions, right? And what I wanted to point out here is that from raise to launch, if you look at the set of bullets, right, the implementation is just one bullet. The V1 of the product is just one part of it. So when you're a founder, what you need to be aware is that launching a product to the market actually has a lot of facets which aren't to do with just the implementation of the product, right? And when we are engineers, this one bullet, this, the V1 of the product, that occupies so much of our mind share that we tend to ignore a lot of the other aspects of launching a product or a business, right? And for those of us who have been in, product marketing or outbound marketing or sales, we already know in our batch that, okay, there's a lot more to revenue than just building the product. But I want to make sure that for the engineers among us, what you need to recognize is that to launch a product, you need to get your messaging right. You need to know how to tell the story of what your product does, right? And that story should be something that relates to the customer, right? When the customer sees your story, they should be able to get it. Yes, I need this. I want to buy this product, right? And you need a lot of collaterals, like you need white papers, you need videos, you need things that can help convince the customer, right? And then you need a PR strategy. What does PR strategy mean? It can mean various different things. It really means how you're going to leverage press, how you're going to leverage the communication mediums that are available to you, right? And you need your marketing and sales to be ready at launch in the sense that once you launch and you're out live, every customer that comes, you should be ready to capitalize on them to the extent that you can, right? So while you launch, before you launch, you really need to build your strategy around, okay, how am I going to get my message across? How am I going to sell the product? Who is going to sell the product? What is the playbook they're going to use to sell the product? Are they going to make calls? Are they going to send emails? Are they going to go travel to the customer? Whatever it is, right? All of these things have to be in place before you launch. Any thoughts on this slide?
Smashy, let's keep going.
Yeah. Okay. So, this was our office mid 2013 through 2015, I would say. This was the team. This small face here, this, I don't know if you can see my cursor. This is Karthik. This is my co-founder, right? Many of these folks are people who I knew from my past life, at least the engineers, but a lot of them were also people who we hired later, right? So we're now live, launched. Now what? What do we do? Okay. One of the most important things is demand generation, right? Demand generation means how do we get the customers coming to our company asking for our product, right? You're trying to generate demand. It's kind of a misnomer, but what it ends up being is you are really building awareness of your product with your customers, right? And there was a question in the survey saying, how do I generate a revenue stream once I have a product? Demand generation is one of the first steps that you have to go through. And here I have like a bunch of things that we did extensively. For example, every couple of weeks we used to generate a blog. Everybody in the company was blogging, and our head of marketing would coordinate that and edit it and message that on the website. We did interviews widely, and we had in B2B, there is this concept of an analyst, market analyst. It may not be there in every market, but these are experts who describe how the market is shaping up, how the market is progressing. And we had analysts like Frost and Sullivan and Chetan Sharma and others write white papers on our product saying, here is why Twin Prime helps. Here is how you compare it with, let's say, Akamai or Segment or whatever else, right? And of course, press through, we had a PR agency, but you could do it differently. Basically getting stories out there which people might want to read and just create an awareness of your brand, right? And here I have like a few of the screenshots which I have a few fun stories about, but what's the time now? 9:30. Okay. So Bloomberg carried our story about how iPhones seem to be slower on Verizon's network compared to Android phones, especially Samsung phones, right? And this ended up becoming a bigger issue. What we saw in our data, so we had like millions of users on our network, right? On the Twin Prime network. We used that data to analyze it, and we would generate these insights every couple of weeks. And one of these insights we saw was that, hey, wait a minute, here is a telecom operator, Verizon, with an LTE network in the US, and users who are on iPhone are experiencing a slower speed of download than users who are on Samsung. And that was immediately interesting to us because why would the LTE chip is the same, it's Qualcomm on both phones. Why would it make a difference? And we published a blog about it, Bloomberg picked it up, and and turned out later on there was a Qualcomm versus Apple lawsuit about this, and it spiraled out from there. So one thing I want to say about this is that when you put out content regularly, every couple of weeks or so, you have these kind of serendipitous occurrences where broader news media picks it up, and suddenly a lot of people who read Bloomberg technology know about Twin Prime, like, hey, wait a minute, who is this Twin Prime? Why are they putting this out? And you now suddenly have mind share in your target audience, right? And the other story here is that we used to do this thing which never failed, where we would have like a speed fight kind of a thing where we would pit cities against each other. We'd say, hey, Hyderabad is faster, or Seattle is faster. It invariably got picked up by a local newspaper saying, Seattle is the fastest thing, and whatever, right? So, but then in the body of the article, you'll see that, hey, this data is from Twin Prime, and people click through and come to our website. And the people who care about these kind of things are the people who are also close to the decision makers, right? That's the thing about content and demand generation. It's very, very powerful, and I'm going to tell you one more story on how it helped us. So what do you do once they come to your website? It's not the end of the journey. There's a lot of work to be done once a user comes to your site. What it ends up being is a kind of a nurturing of the interest to make it higher and higher to the point where that visitor is willing to pay for your product, right? And this is called lead generation in some B2B contexts. But essentially what it is about using software to track users over multiple visits and kind of scoring what they do. If they came and spent 5 minutes on your website, you give them like a score of 100, let's say. Let's say they came and clicked on a particular article and they read through the article, you give them 200 points or something. And if they filled out a form for downloading a particular white paper, they're like 1,000 points, right? At that point, you know that, okay, they're very, very interested in your product. They're willing to give their contact information to you. That's a very high bar. At that point, you hand over the lead to your salesperson and say, hey, Mr. Salesperson, go reach out to this person. They seem to be very interested in our stuff, right? Sometimes it goes even beyond that. For example, after one of our content generation activities succeeded very well, like, the blog was very successful. The CTO of News Scout came to our site and signed up saying, hey, I want to use this product. right? And they became a customer. Right? So these kind of windfalls can happen if you put your content out there, share your expertise, describe what your product is doing on a regular basis in a manner that generates a buzz. Right? So what do you do once the salesperson gets the lead? Well, there is a long journey after that until you get money. And here I've kind of compressed the steps into just 3 buckets. But you see how this, it's like an inverted pyramid where the bottom close rhombus kind of gets shrinks smaller, and that's deliberate because from the moment you get a lead till the moment you close, a lot of customers just drop off. They can't pay, or they're not willing to pay, they lose interest, things change, whatever, right? And this journey, like, going from a lead who is interested in your product till they pay is called the sales funnel. And there's a lot of thinking that a lot of entrepreneurs have done on this. If you go search online, you'll see a lot of really good tips on how you can make the most out of a lead that you get. How do you maximize your conversion rate of going from a lead to a close, right? So what these past 3 slides tell you is that going from product to revenue is a long journey, okay? There is a lot of science to it. There's also a lot of fine art to it. And there are domain experts who specialize in these things. If you're a solo entrepreneur, you can do subsets of these things. But the one thing that I want you to take away is that it's not enough if you just build your product. You need to make sure that your potential customers know about it. They understand why they would buy it if they did. And they have to have outreach and hand-holding to make them buy, right? For somebody to give you money, it's a big, big step, right? Any thoughts around this revenue generation aspect of it? It's a very challenging part of any business.
Satish, we'll ask you questions at the end, so you can go ahead on your stuff. We will not bother you with questions right now.
Okay, yeah, I think it's already late for a lot of people. Yeah. Okay, next section, the exit, right? I have a GIF here. I don't know if you guys can see the GIF. We hit like a growth wall, and I'm going to talk about it, right? So we had quite a few early successes. If you see here, this Fortune 50 retailer was Amazon, Zappos. We had retail, news media, travel, a lot of different kinds of customers, really good names, but that wasn't enough. And this goes back to that slide that Ken and I were talking about, the cost of raising money, right? We ran into a growth wall. What that means is that we were selling better performance, right? We were telling customers that, hey, use our product and your end users will have a better mobile experience and you will make more money as a result of that. People will buy more, spend more time on your properties and so on. And what we realized was that performance in itself was not enough as a sale. And one of the reasons was that our budget came from something called CDN infrastructure budget. What that means is that when you're a large enterprise, you have a budget which says, okay, here I'm going to spend $1 million this year on any technology that will deliver content, right? And we used to sell to the VPNs or CTO or the technical part of the organization, right? And people like Akamai, who are like CDNs, those are companies that deliver content. They were selling to the IT head, the CIO. Okay. Now, in the eyes of the CRO, the person driving the revenue for a company or for an enterprise, there were now 2 bills. There's a CTO who is saying, I want to buy Twin Prime. There is this CIO saying, I want to buy Akamai. And I know that Akamai provides some features that I must buy, like, staging and content management and things like that. But Twin Prime, yeah, performance sucks, but you know what? If I didn't have performance, I'd still have functionality, right? That's the growth wall we ran into, where we realized that just performance was not enough for our market, right? And then we made a lot of errors, right? Unforced errors, as I call it. We underestimated the trust factor. We were a small startup. Not a lot of large companies would be willing to trust us with their traffic, even though some very, very large names actually trusted with their revenue traffic with us. This was still a factor, right? And we walked away from some early partnership opportunities where when the incumbent leaders came to us saying, hey, Twin Prime, we want to partner with you, we said, yeah, never mind, we're going to beat you to the pulp. We are better. So the hubris got to us. Right? And we were slow to let go of directions that didn't work and fire people who did not deliver. Right? So those things contributed to the growth wall. And what that meant was that there was a clock ticking. Right? When you raise external money, you have some milestones in mind. And if you're not going to meet those milestones, you have to act and act fast. Right? So with our 9 months of money left, we had the realization that we would not have the growth numbers that would justify a Series B valuation. Right? And the choices before us, when I say us, I mean board and us, is that, okay, we stick it out. Let's say we cut costs to the minimum, and we kind of survive in a mode where there is only a little bit of engineering to keep the product going, and we iterate and figure out what kind of market we need to be in, right? And here, the first choice would hurt a lot of the stakeholders. It would hurt investors because there is likely going to be a recapitalization. It's likely going to hurt founders. It's likely going to hurt the team. But the company could make it out on the other end. There are a lot of people who do this and do this successfully. If you know about Slack almost went out of business. They were like a gaming company called, I don't know what, something else. And then they made it out through their nuclear winter, right? The second option was, we have a product which we know works in the field. Like we had like at that point, like, about 20 to 30 million active users monthly. So it was a deployed product with a large installed base. So we said, hey, why don't we just leverage the value that we've built? Maybe there are companies that would like to leverage this value. Right? We decided to go the second route. We decided that we are going to leverage the value we had built and get a reasonable outcome to everybody, the team, the investors, and us and everybody. Right? So at that point, we hired, I call a boutique investment banker. I put it in quotes because it's very fuzzy what it means. It essentially means that you are not big enough to hire an investment banking firm like a Goldman Sachs, for example, because you're not yet in the money. Like you don't have enough of a revenue stream that you would get an outcome which is hundreds of millions of dollars, and those bankers wouldn't even engage because they have their plate full as it is. But you do want an investment banker because they bring a set of relationships in corporate development and boards and such circles, and they have sheer experience doing these kinds of deals, either joint ventures or strategic partnerships and things like that, right? So the first step for us was we thought, we'll strike up a strategic partnership where, let's say, a larger player would take a bigger stake in our company, right? Maybe we are even majority owned by a larger company. And we would continue working as an independent company, except that, they might buy out the existing investors and execute on a particular market direction, right? And what we realized was that, after spending like about 6 months on that direction, that we didn't have enough time. Every strategic partnership route that we found would take more than 9 to 12 months to even get operationalized, right? So at that point, we decided, yes, sale is the best option right now. given where we are, right? And the question is, how do you sell a company? Well, it's not very different from selling a product. You need to figure out what the buyer is looking for, who's your buyer, positioning the company's value, and then driving a good deal, right? But it's more complicated. Every decision you make has a permanent impact on people, and our decisions did have an impact as well. We couldn't go to certain parts of the industry and say, okay, this going here means I have to let go like half the people or something like that. And hey guys, can you mute? Okay.
Then put that one also, the one which is given there.
Kiran, you need to mute. Okay. So the other aspect of selling a company is it takes a lot of time and effort. For us, we got lucky that it took only 3 months end to end. But in general, the chances are that you can't sell for what you want. Okay. If you are starting a company, don't have a sale as your ultimate outcome, because that will end up handicapping your vision, right? You have to think of a sale as something that happens as a byproduct of some value you've built, right? It could be one of the ways you exit. Don't build a company to sell, okay? Because it's a very, very tough thing to sell a company. Okay. So December 2016, we sold Twin Prime to Salesforce. And then, I want to just again revisit. We said, mobile had problems. What happened? Is it not a problem anymore? We sold and we're gone. What about mobile? Well, I just revisited the 3 things that we encapsulated our vision. The fast evolution of the internet transport stack. Google did it with KREC. Just last month, Google's protocol is getting standardized. So if you are on mobile using YouTube, Chrome, Facebook, you're already getting this first bullet that we wanted to achieve. The second bullet, adapting to the newer infrastructure. Again, Google to the rescue. Google introduced a new algorithm called BBR in 2016. And if you are within the walled gardens of Facebook and Google, you are getting this benefit. What about machine learning? We were driving Twin Prime network with machine learning. Well, even in the gated communities, you don't have it today. However, MIT showed that if you did use machine learning, you would do a lot better than what we are doing right now. That's called REMI. If you're interested in networking, go check out mit.edu/REMI. And how about the mobile data forecast? Was it right? Well, not really. 2015 did not reach 6 exabytes as in the chart that I showed earlier. It reached 3 exabytes. But then, what's a few exabytes here and there, right? And then the 2020 mobile usage right now is at 30 exabytes. So, we are definitely still growing exponentially. So the mobile market did pan out, but the numbers were slightly off, right? So, what this slide tells you is that even when you are right about most of your vision, like 2 of the 3 things that we thought should happen to the internet were on the right track, it didn't translate to business success, right? We didn't become Google, right? So that's something that you have to really think deeply about, that it's not enough to be right about product and technology. Okay, there's a lot that goes in to making a successful business. And to be honest, I don't think anybody knows what it takes, right? It's a whole lot of factors. And if somebody is telling you that I know what it takes to make your business a success, I would be very skeptical. Okay. So I want to spend a little bit of time on providing a few resources. I won't spend too much time. It's already 9:30. Are we out of time? I think so, right?
Keep going, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just spend like a few minutes on this. I'll try to wrap up in 5 minutes. Oh, okay, good. So if there are folks who want to sign off, but they have some question at this point, you can feel free to interrupt, okay? I definitely want to recommend that you read this Soul of a New Machine book. This is a book that I really, really enjoyed. It takes you through the journey of a product. It's written by a journalist, but he's done a really fantastic job. And then there is this podcast which I truly enjoy, which is called How I Built This by Guy Raz, or Guy Raz, I think. And this is a podcast where every week or 2 weeks, he speaks with an entrepreneur and really talks about these questions. How did you build it? How did you sell? How did you get your first customer? How did you scale? What were your problems, right? It's a phenomenal podcast. Amazing. And there are so many of his podcasts where you'll be brought to tears. That's the power of the stories that Guy Raz tells you. I highly recommend this, right? Some Twitter handles that I would recommend you follow. I really enjoy following Aaron Levy, who's the founder of Box, Deepak Shenoy, who is our senior. I don't know if many of you know, he was in our CS batch, 2 years senior to us. Really fantastic guy, very successful. Rohan Jilkes is another entrepreneur who is amazing. He builds in public. There's a hashtag called Build in Public. I definitely encourage you to follow that hashtag. This is an article, How Superhuman Built an Engine to Find Product Market Fit. And product market fit is something that, in the app, in the B2C and B2B world, it's a big deal. I don't know if it is outside of those kind of isolated bubbles, but we get all worked up about product market fit. And it's this situation where literally the customers are banging down your door to get your product, right? That's product market fit, pretty much, like in an informal sense. And this article is really fantastic. This is by somebody called Rahul Vora, who's the founder of Superhuman. He tells you how he exactly went through iterating his product, what metrics he used, and how he got customer adoption, what he tweaked. Really fantastic article. And if you're into, CS stuff and computer engineering and startups in general, Hacker News, I spend, I don't know, amount of time which I shouldn't be spending on Hacker News, right? Some things, a lot of my friends ask of me, intros, don't hesitate. Review of pitch decks, just general sounding board. People just, want to say what's on their mind and have me poke holes or things like that. And what did you do for something? Like, hey, what payroll vendor did you use? How did you run your healthcare? Things like that, right? I'm on WhatsApp, but, I think the top people know that I barely interact on the group. But if you DM me, I'll definitely respond. Usually, if I haven't responded to you, apologies, please reach out to me again, right? LinkedIn and email, of course. So before taking the plunge, there are lots of right reasons to start a business. Your reason is no less of a reason than anyone else's. But what I want you to be aware of is that you need to invest something like 10 years to make a successful business, right? And assume something like 3 years where you won't have a stable income. Okay, if you can withstand those timelines, that's when you should feel ready to start a business, right? And the other thing a lot of people ignore is insurance. I think in any market, at least India and US, where there are a lot of insurance vendors, you'll find some version of liability insurance. Please, before you start a business, get liability insurance. In some markets, like in the US, there's also other, like if you're forming a C Corp, you can get director and officer insurance. May not be applicable always, right? COVID last thoughts. I think remote work is more feasible than ever, and this helps founders a lot. I do think though that the founding team being co-located can definitely help move faster and forge a bond quicker. The way I think about remote hiring is when you have specific domain expertise that is hard to hire. Let's say if I say, hey, it's nearly impossible to get a data engineer in Bangalore. Sure, why not hire them in Hyderabad or somewhere else, right? And it's also likely that sales will continue to be a contact sport, at least for the bigger sales items, but there are better experts than me on that front. Okay, now time for a pop quiz. What do you think our Twin Prime logo signifies?
2 prime numbers.
Okay, actually the name of the company did indeed refer to prime numbers. When we chose Twin Prime, we chose it for the math problem where it says there are an infinite number of primes that differ by 2. But how about this picture, this logo? What does this?
Faster download.
What does that, Ken? Can you repeat that?
Speed.
Faster uploading, faster downloading.
Very, very close. Very, very close. Yes, you're right. So this is our beloved physics formula for speed. Lambda nu, lambda is wavelength, nu is frequency, and c is speed. Okay. And with that, I want to open up for questions. I hope you got something useful out of it and you enjoyed it.
Amazing talk, Smashy.
Thank you, Amit.
So Smashy, did you go to those?
What the questions that are in the chat?
Yeah. I'll open up the chat. Monty, you were saying something?
So I'm saying, did you go to those famous Silicon Valley parties or any stories?
Whenever I read Dick Milton, this is NYT column. Is that what you're referring to?
The ones you see in the movies.
Like, I was thinking, hey, wait a minute, I'm in a different part of the valley. Where are these guys? But yeah, we did have some really nice parties, but nothing like what the NYT guys describe. NYT, if you haven't figured out by now, New York Times is not happy with tech. Okay, let's go to the top of the chat.
Question from Subhash Kamath. How is life different now that you're back into corporate?
It's a shock. It's a shock on how slow things move. In Twin Prime, we made a decision and we just went with it. It was we experimented in production. If you know the software lingo, right? And in Salesforce, to be fair, we have extraordinary visibility into the leadership. I'm truly thankful for Salesforce in that sense, because what we did once we came to Salesforce is that we changed how Salesforce data is delivered. If there are some sales and marketing people among us, we use Salesforce to track our customer relationships and do marketing and things like that, right? And what we said was that we're going to put Twin Prime software in between the customer and the Salesforce backend. And we're at a point where we have rolled it out to about a quarter of our largest customers. These are like, hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue customers. So, that's the positive of it, that, the leadership believed in us and gave that forum to make it a reality. But it has taken like, 3.5 years to get here. If I were in Twin Prime, it would have taken us 3 months to do the same thing. Hope that answers it. Okay. Next question.
Smashy,
can
I ask a question?
Okay, let's do a pattern. Who was that on the phone?
This is Bala Nirmala.
Bala, yeah.
This is Bala. Okay. So how do you attract talent at various stages? Let me double click on that question. Maybe second part of it is, maybe getting new college grads might be easier, but if you need a seasoned professional, how do you attract them?
Yeah, it's a very, very tough challenge. And, I want to say a little bit about the new grad versus senior hiring. In a startup, really what you need is senior talent. You don't want the new grad usually, but they can make a big difference, right? So if you're going to hire for a new grad, the kind of new grads that you want to hire are the ones who are self-driven, okay? The ones who need very little direction, okay? You can see those markers. They would have their own projects. They would have their own opinions. They won't listen to you. They're very hard to control. Those are the people you need to hire, right? Because, as a founder, you have very little time to direct. You want your team to just keep going and make mistakes and anger customers, that's great, fantastic. And you don't want somebody to be waiting, oh my God, Satish didn't reply to my email, what do I do? No, I want somebody who's like, yeah, what can go wrong? Boom, right? Those are the kind of new grads you need to be hiring. The advantage with more senior folks is that they have already made the mistakes, right? And they are probably making, sorry for the language, shit ton more money wherever they came from. And they're there simply for the reason that they align with your passion. They align with your vision for that space. So if you're able to find a senior grad, the impact is just outsized, okay? And if you are able to reward them with enough equity and ownership in the company, the amount of impact you can have is truly spectacular, but it's very, very challenging. It's a sales job, right? Every time I went and hired somebody, I had to sell Twin Prime all over again, saying, here is why you need to come on board, right? It's a very tough job.
They have to align on your vision, and they have to be willing to compromise a comp in the short term, looks like.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go to the chat for the next question. Amit, what's the next one on the chat?
Well, I'll just go what I see, sir, because the drop off in the middle.
Okay.
So, Smashy, what is keeping in large corporate still? Is it unfinished business of Twin Prime, which you want to see something to level of closure, or something else?
Yeah. It's a little bit of both, in terms of ideas and things that we could do, it's something that never stops, right? Every few weeks we talk about something that we could be doing, and one thing that happens after you've been through the journey once is that you have a higher filter, because the things that wouldn't work right away. You have a better gut check that this will not fly, right? So that's one thing that there hasn't been an idea that has bubbled up to the level that says, yeah, we're gonna commit. The other is that I do have certain milestones that I want to hit with Salesforce, and by end of FY22, which is starting February through following February, almost entire CRM traffic will be flowing through the technology we built, which is something that I want to get done. And the other thing is that I also want to think about social impact. Like climate is something that's on top of my mind. I don't know enough there, but I'm just starting to think about what could I do to help with climate, right? So I'll take some more time, maybe a few more years before I think of what's next.
Hey, Smashy.
Guti, can you stop recording?
Yeah.
Hello.